Victoria Chen wiped her paint-stained hands on her already spotted apron, her tired eyes scanning the small riverside gallery. At just 26, she de-learned a hard lesson. Survival meant keeping her head down and working 3 times harder than anyone else. The morning light streamed through dusty windows, casting long shadows across restored paintings that were waiting for buyers who, more often than not, never showed up. She moved quietly through the cramped space, checking each frame, adjusting the lighting, making sure everything was absolutely perfect for today's charity viewing. Her boss, Mrs. Patterson, had been crystal clear. Important donors were coming, and the gallery desperately needed their support. One tiny mistake could cost Victoria her job, a risk she simply couldn't afford. Her entire life was built on sacrifice. Behind the small door to the storage room, 5-year-old Lily sat on a blanket, surrounded by her coloring books and crayons. The kindergarten had closed unexpectedly for repairs, leaving Victoria with no childcare. She'd practically begged Mrs. Patterson for understanding, promising Lily would stay hidden and silent. Raising her niece alone for the past 2 years had transformed Victoria from a carefree artist into someone who calculated every single penny, every risk, every decision. After her sister Rebecca died tragically in a car accident, Victoria had set aside her own dreams of becoming a painter to give Lily a stable life. The art restoration job barely covered their rent and food, but it kept them together. Lily was the complete opposite of Victoria. Where Victoria had learned to make herself invisible, Lily blazed with an energy and curiosity that couldn't be contained. Her little black pigtails bounced with every movement, and her bright, almond-shaped eyes sparkled with mischief.
Ow.
She was a whirlwind of endless questions, believing every stranger was a potential new friend. At precisely 10 o'clock, the gallery door swung open. Victoria glanced up from polishing a gilded frame and felt the entire atmosphere in the room shift. 3 people walked in, a silver-haired woman in expensive designer clothes, a young assistant clutching a tablet, and a man who commanded attention without even trying. Nicholas Thornfield. He stood a good 6 feet tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Victoria's annual salary. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp, his presence utterly overwhelming. At 34, he'd built a global technology empire that had changed the way people communicate. Forbes magazine had recently named him one of the most influential entrepreneurs under 40. But Victoria saw something else. Beneath that polished, perfect exterior, his gray eyes held a profound, deep-seated sadness. He moved through the gallery with a kind of mechanical politeness, nodding at paintings without really seeing them. His smile was a practiced gesture that never reached his eyes. Mrs. Patterson rushed forward, gushing with greetings and explanations. Victoria instinctively retreated further into the background, hoping to remain unnoticed. It was a skill she had perfected over years of feeling out of place, of feeling inadequate in spaces where she was sure she didn't belong. But Lily, restless in the storage room, had other plans. Despite Victoria's warnings, the little girl crept out, drawn by the new voices and the promise of new people. She was carrying her favorite watercolor set, wanting to show her aunt a new painting she'd just finished. What happened next unfolded in what felt like slow motion. Lily rounded a corner just as Nicholas stepped back to get a better view of a landscape painting. They collided. The watercolor set flew from Lily's small hands, the paint tubes exploding in a rainbow burst all over Nicholas's pristine suit jacket. Bright blues, reds, and yellows splattered across the expensive fabric like a piece of abstract art. The entire gallery fell silent. Mrs. Patterson let out a horrified gasp. The silver-haired woman looked like she was about to faint. Victoria's heart stopped beating completely. This was it. The moment everything changed. Victoria rushed forward, her face burning with a mix of shame and absolute terror. She grabbed a handful of paper towels, stammering apologies that tumbled over one another. Mrs. Patterson was already apologizing profusely, promising to cover all the cleaning costs, assuring Nicholas this was an anomaly, that it had never happened before. But Nicholas stood perfectly still, his gaze fixed on Lily, the little girl. Instead of crying or running away, just looked up at the towering man with complete and utter trust. Then, she did something extraordinary. Lily reached up and grabbed Nicholas's silk tie with both her little hands, tugging gently to bring his face closer to hers. Before Victoria could stop her, Lily whispered something directly into his ear. Her voice was too soft for anyone else to hear, but whatever she said made Nicholas's entire body go rigid. His polite mask crumbled away. His eyes widened, then suddenly filled with tears that he fought desperately to control. His hands began to tremble as he knelt down to Lily's level, his ruined suit completely forgotten. Victoria finally reached them, trying to pry Lily's fingers from his tie. She was mortified, terrified, and absolutely certain this would end with them both being thrown out and her losing her job. But when she touched Nicholas's shoulder to apologize yet again, he looked up at her with such raw, unguarded emotion that the words died in her throat. Nicholas ignored the paint, the crowd, the expensive surroundings. His entire world had narrowed to the small child in front of him. His voice came out hoarse, barely controlled. "What did you just say to me?" Lily smiled, her gap-toothed grin lighting up her face. She repeated her whisper, this time loud enough for Victoria to hear. "My mama used to say the sun always comes back even after the longest night. Your son will come back too." Uncle Thomas told her that before he went to heaven. The name hit Nicholas like a physical blow. Thomas, his brother's name, spoken by a child who shouldn't know it, who had no reason to know it. His brother who had died 3 years ago, leaving Nicholas drowning in a sea of grief and guilt. Victoria stared back and forth between Lily and Nicholas, confusion and a growing concern mixing with her embarrassment. How did Lily know that name? Rebecca had mentioned a Thomas years ago, a college friend who had passed away, but Victoria had never connected that person to anyone important. Nicholas slowly, unsteadily, got to his feet. He looked at Victoria properly for the first time, really seeing her. He saw the faint specks of pain in her hair, the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the way she held herself small, trying to take up less space in the world. "Your daughter?" he began, but Victoria quickly shook her head. "Niece, I'm raising her. My sister passed away 2 years ago." Something clicked in Nicholas's expression. Recognition dawned, followed by disbelief, and then a sense of wonder. "Your sister? Was her name Rebecca?" Victoria nodded slowly, her world tilting on its axis. How did this billionaire know her sister? What impossible connection existed that she had never known about? Mrs. Patterson tried to intervene, still apologizing, offering compensation. The silver-haired woman suggested they leave. But Nicholas just raised one hand, silencing everyone. His eyes never left Victoria's face. "Rebecca Chen," he said, his voice soft. "She studied art history. She volunteered at the Children's Hospital where my brother spent his final months. She used to bring paintings to brighten his room. She talked about her little sister who dreamed of becoming an artist." Tears were streaming down Victoria's face now. She remembered those days. She remembered Rebecca coming home from the hospital with stories about a brave patient who loved art despite his illness. But Rebecca had never mentioned the patient's family was wealthy or important. She had simply cared about bringing a small bit of comfort to someone who was suffering. With shaking hands, Nicholas pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos. He found one and showed it to Victoria. The image was of a thin young man in a hospital bed, smiling despite the obvious pain, holding up a small watercolor painting. Standing beside him, beaming, was Rebecca. "She gave him that painting," Nicholas said softly. "It's the only thing he wanted buried with him." The gallery around them ceased to exist. There were only 3 strangers, bound by grief, by memory, and by an impossible coincidence, standing together in a moment that felt like it was orchestrated by something larger than chance. Lily tugged on Nicholas's hand, completely unaware of the magnitude of what was happening. She just saw a sad man who needed the same comfort her mama used to give. "You can come to our house for cookies," she offered seriously. "Aunt Vicky makes really good ones. They help when you're missing people." And for the first time in 3 long years, Nicholas laughed. It was a broken sound, but it was genuine. He crouched down again, taking Lily's small hand in his much larger one. "I would like that very much." The charity event was a blur, but one moment stood out. After my 5-year-old niece, Lily, accidentally spilled juice all over Nicholas Thornfield's expensive suit. I expected anger. Instead, this billionaire CEO spent 20 minutes sitting on the gallery floor with her, just listening to her chatter about kindergarten. I watched them, completely stunned. Before he left, he did something that made my heart race. He scribbled his personal phone number on the back of his business card and pressed it into my hand. His gray eyes were so intense. "Please call me," he said. "I need to know more about Rebecca, about how your sister touched my brother's life when I was too broken to be there for him myself." That night, I sat at our tiny kitchen table, staring at that card. The number felt like a doorway to a world I didn't belong in, a world of wealth and power so far from my cramped apartment and paycheck-to-paycheck life. But my sister Rebecca, she would have wanted me to call. She always believed in following unexpected paths. 3 days passed before I finally found the courage. My hands were shaking as I dialed. The phone rang twice, and then his voice, warm and a little breathless, answered, "Victoria?" My stomach did a complete flip. I was so sure an assistant would answer. "How did you know it was me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I've been hoping you'd call," he said. "I saved your number from the gallery's contact list. I'm sorry if that's intrusive. I just didn't want to miss your call." That first night, we talked for 2 hours. He asked such gentle questions about Rebecca, and I found myself opening up, sharing memories I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Her laugh that sounded like wind chimes, her passion for bringing art and beauty to people who needed it most. And in return, Nicholas opened up about wounds he'd kept hidden for 3 years. He told me about his younger brother Thomas, who was diagnosed with leukemia just as he was finishing medical school. He talked about how the disease stole his future, one painful treatment at a time, and then his voice cracked. "I failed him," he admitted. "I was building my company, traveling all the time, making deals I thought were so important. I visited when I could, but it was never enough. I was so focused on success that I missed his final weeks. I was in Tokyo, closing a merger when he died. Hearing his pain, my own guilt, a shadow that followed me everywhere, resurfaced. I was supposed to pick Rebecca up that night," I confessed. "She called because her car wouldn't start, but I was in the middle of a big restoration project for a demanding client. I told her to just take the bus, that I'd get her later. A drunk driver ran a red light. She never made it home. The silence that hung between us was heavy with a shared understanding. Some burdens are just too heavy for words." "Your sister gave Thomas something precious," Nicholas finally said. "In his last months, when he could barely leave his bed, she brought the world to him through her art. She would describe paintings in such vivid detail that he could see them in his mind. She made him laugh. She reminded him that beauty still existed outside that hospital room. Tears streamed down my face. I'd never known the full impact of her volunteer work. I just knew she went to the hospital to share her love for art." Then, he asked something unexpected. "Would you and Lily join me for dinner? There's something I want to show you, something I think Rebecca would have wanted you to see." My first instinct was to say no. What could a struggling artist and single guardian possibly have in common with a billionaire? But then I thought of Lily, who kept asking about the nice man from the gallery. "So," I heard myself say, "Lily would love that." Saturday evening arrived way too fast. I stood in front of my closet feeling completely hopeless. Nothing I owned felt right for a dinner at a place I'd only read about in fancy magazines. My nicest dress had a tiny stain, my shoes were scuffed. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who counts every penny. But Lily, she was bouncing around in her little yellow sundress, not a care in the world. I wished I had her innocence. A sleek black car arrived to pick us up. The driver treated us like royalty, and I felt like a total imposter as we drove through neighborhoods that got progressively richer and richer. When we pulled up to the restaurant, Nicholas was waiting outside. My breath caught. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a simple blue sweater. Somehow this casual, real version of him was even more intimidating. "You came," he said, and the relief in his voice was so genuine, as if he'd actually worried I wouldn't show. Lily immediately ran to him and grabbed his hand. Without a second thought, he lifted her onto his shoulders, and she squealed with pure joy. As I followed them inside, I felt the stares of the other diners. I could practically hear their thoughts. What is someone like Nicholas Thornfield doing with someone so ordinary? But he didn't lead us to the main dining room. He led us to a private room. And inside, it wasn't a formal table. The space had been transformed. It was a huge table covered in art supplies. Canvases were leaning against the walls. "I wanted Lily to have space to create," he explained, watching my shocked face. "And I wanted to show you something." He pulled back a large curtain on one wall, and my throat closed. It was a painting, Rebecca's painting, a watercolor of bright, beautiful flowers blooming from cracked concrete. It's the one she had given to his brother Thomas. "I had it removed from his casket before the funeral," Nicholas said quietly. "I couldn't let it go into the ground. It was too precious. It's painting your sister. They gave my brother hope during his darkest days." Dinner was surprisingly relaxed. Shared dishes family style, and Nicholas was amazing with Lily, asking about her crayon drawings and making silly jokes that had her giggling. But his eyes kept finding mine, not with pity, which is what I usually get, but with something that looked like admiration. "You gave up your dreams to raise Lily," he said in a quiet moment. I just shrugged. "She's my family. It wasn't a choice. There's always a choice," he replied. "You chose love over ambition. That's rare." His words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. No one had ever framed my sacrifice as a strength. As the evening went on, I found myself telling him about my own art, the paintings I dreamed of creating but never had the time or money for. "Why did you stop?" he asked. "Art doesn't pay the bills," I said. "Restoration work does." "What if it could?" he asked, leaning forward. "What if you had the resources to create without worry?" I immediately got defensive. "I don't want charity. That's not what I'm offering," he said, his gaze intense. "I have a foundation that supports emerging artists. We provide grants, studio space. Your work deserves to be seen, Victoria. Rebecca would have wanted that for you." The mention of my sister broke through all my defenses. She had always been my biggest cheerleader. "I don't know if I'm good enough," I whispered. "Let me be the judge of that," he said. "Show me your work, not as a billionaire offering a handout, but as someone who understands loss and second chances. Let me help you honor Rebecca's memory by becoming the artist she knew you could be." He pulled out his phone and showed me pictures of a beautiful art studio flooded with natural light. "This space belongs to my foundation. It's empty. Use it. Create." My heart was hammering in my chest. Accepting this felt so dangerous, like letting him into my carefully guarded life. But just then, Lily ran over with her latest drawing. It was a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. She pointed proudly. "That's you, me, and Aunt Vicky. We're all friends now, right?" Nicholas looked at me over Lily's head, and in his eyes I saw it. The same loneliness I carried. The same desperate need for connection. The same flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, something beautiful could grow from all this shared grief. "Yes," Nicholas said softly, answering both Lily and the unspoken question hanging between us. "We're friends now," and in that moment I nodded. I was stepping into a world I didn't understand, but maybe that was exactly what I needed to do to finally start healing. Thank you for watching. Please follow for the next part of the story. The past 3 months felt like a beautiful dream Victoria was afraid to wake up from. Her mornings were spent at the Restoration Gallery, and her afternoons in the incredible studio Nicholas had set up for her. That space, filled with natural light and endless supplies, was a game changer. Creativity just poured out of her, like water finally bursting through a dam. Nicholas visited often. Sometimes he'd bring lunch. Other times, he'd just sit quietly while she painted. He had this amazing instinct for an artist's need for solitude, never interrupting. But his steady presence was a comfort, an anchor in her chaotic world. And Lily, she absolutely adored him. She'd officially declared Nicholas her best grown-up friend, a role he took on with a surprising amount of tenderness. He even came to her kindergarten play, sitting right there beside Victoria, and cheered louder than anyone when Lily came on stage dressed as a flower. He knew her favorite ice cream was strawberry, and that her stuffed rabbit's name was Barnaby. Watching their bond grow, Victoria felt her own carefully built walls starting to crumble. Nicholas had become such a natural part of their lives, it was hard to remember what life was like before him. The shift came on a Tuesday night. Nicholas had invited them to a gallery opening. Victoria wore her best dress, which felt simple next to all the designer gowns. But the way Nicholas looked at her made her feel like the most stunning woman in the world. They were standing in front of this controversial modern art piece, debating what it meant, when a photographer came up and asked for a picture. Nicholas just smiled and pulled her close. Camera flashed, and she didn't think anything of it, till the next morning. Her phone was blowing up. The photo was everywhere, social media, gossip sites. The headlines were insane. Tech billionaire's mystery woman, and is Nicholas Thornfield off the market? At the gallery, her coworkers started whispering. Her boss, Mrs. Patterson, called her into her office with questions Victoria had no idea how to answer. By the afternoon, reporters had found the gallery, trying to get a quote from anyone who knew her. Suddenly, she felt completely exposed, like an insect pinned under glass. This was Nicholas's world, a world of intense public scrutiny, and she knew, with a sinking feeling, that she didn't belong in it. That weekend, Nicholas invited her to dinner at his family's estate. The moment they drove through those massive iron gates, up to a house that looked more like a palace, she knew it was a mistake. Waiting for them was Gregory Thornfield. Nicholas's father was in his 70s, with silver hair and an air of disapproval that was almost suffocating. "So, you're the girl from the tabloids," he said, without even a hello. His cold eyes looked her up and down. The art restorer raising her dead sister's child. Nicholas went rigid beside her. "Father, Victoria is my guest. You will treat her with respect." Gregory let out a sharp laugh. "Respect, Nicholas? You've lost your mind. This woman is obviously after your money. Look at her. She works in a gallery for peanuts. What else could she possibly want?" The words hit her like physical blows. She expected judgment, but not this level of cruelty. She stood up, her dignity the only thing she had left. "I didn't ask Nicholas for anything. I don't want his money. I'm sorry for intruding." She started walking toward the door, fighting back tears, but Nicholas grabbed her hand. "Don't leave. He doesn't speak for me." Gregory's face turned red. "She's using you, son. Just like that other woman 5 years ago. You're vulnerable because of what happened to Thomas." She saw an opportunity and she took it. Nicholas's voice dropped to an icy tone. "You know nothing about her? You've spent 5 minutes with her, and you've already passed judgment. That says more about you than it does about her. I'm protecting you from another mistake." "Thomas would have loved her," Nicholas said, and the quiet words silenced his father. "Thomas would have seen what I see. Someone kind and genuine, who gives everything to the people she loves and expects nothing back. Someone who makes me feel alive again after 3 years of just going through the motions." Her heart was pounding. She never realized just how deeply he felt until that moment, hearing him defend her like that. Gregory's face hardened. "If you pursue this, there will be consequences. The board will question your judgment. Your reputation will suffer. Then let it suffer," Nicholas replied, his voice firm. "I'm done living the life everyone else planned for me. I'm done being the perfect son, the perfect CEO. I want to live, and Victoria makes me want to do that." The drive back was heavy with a tense silence. She stared out the window, her mind racing. Nicholas had chosen her, but at what cost? Was she really going to be the reason his reputation and family relationships were damaged? "I should step back," she said softly. "Your father's right about some things. Our worlds are too different. I'll always be the poor girl who doesn't fit in." Nicholas slammed on the brakes, pulling the car over. He turned to her, his gaze intense. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "Someone who doesn't belong." "No, I see someone who sacrificed her own dreams so a little girl wouldn't have to grow up alone. I see someone who brings beauty into the world with her art. I see someone who makes me laugh and think and feel things I thought died with my brother." His voice grew thick with emotion. "I see the woman I'm falling in love with." The confession just hung there in the air between them. Both terrifying and beautiful. Tears filled her eyes, because she felt it too. This powerful connection that scared her more than anything else. Nicholas didn't just say the words. He showed her. In the weeks that followed, when reporters hounded her at work, he hired security to ensure her privacy. When she worried about Lily's school tuition, he set up a scholarship fund for children of single parents at the school, not as charity, but as a community investment. He even came to her first small art show at a local gallery. He showed up early in paint-stained jeans to help hang her paintings and stayed late to help clean up, looking happier than she'd ever seen him in a suit. That night, she sold 3 paintings. Not to rich collectors, but to ordinary people who connected with her art. When the gallery owner handed her the payment, she started crying. Not because of the money, but because someone valued her work enough to buy it. It was the validation she'd craved for years. Nicholas just held her, understanding everything without a word. For months after they first met, she got a phone call that changed her life. A major art magazine wanted to feature her work. They'd seen photos from her little show and were captivated by the emotion in her paintings. They wanted to interview her, to tell her story. Victoria panicked. "This will just bring more attention," she told Nicholas. "More judgment. More fuel for your father." He gently cupped her face. "Let them talk. I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of us. Anyone who matters will see the truth." The article came out 2 weeks later, and the response was overwhelming. Galleries were calling, Collectors were emailing about commissions, but the most meaningful response came from a very unexpected source. Gregory Thornfield showed up at her studio unannounced. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking at the paintings on her walls. "These are remarkable," he admitted. "You have real talent." He paused, his stern expression softening just a little. "My son. He's different since he met you. Lighter. More like he was before Thomas died. Perhaps I was. It's too quick to judge. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was a start." 6 months after Lily tugged on a stranger's tie, Victoria stood in that same gallery. Nicholas had arranged a solo exhibition for her right where their story began. The room was filled with people from both of their worlds, art patrons and tech executives, students and investors. And there was Lily, in a fancy dress, handing out cookies she'd helped bake. Nicholas found her standing in front of her sister Rebecca's watercolor, the one he'd brought from his brother's collection. "Oh, she would be proud of you," he said softly. "They both would," she replied, thinking of Thomas too. "They brought us together." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Her breath caught. "I'm not asking you to change who you are," he said. "I'm asking you to let me stand beside you while you chase every one of your dreams. Let's build a life together where Lily has 2 people loving her, where we honor our siblings by living our lives to the fullest." He opened the box, revealing a simple, beautiful ring. "Marry me, Victoria?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes." Lily let out a squeal of delight and crashed into them, wrapping her little arms around their legs. "Now we're really a family," she declared. Nicholas lifted her onto his hip, pulling Victoria close with his other arm. Applause erupted around them, but Victoria barely heard it. She was too busy kissing the man who saw her when she felt invisible. Love had found her in the most unexpected way, but she learned that being truly seen and truly loved was worth every single risk. Their forever was just beginning.